Hello back to everyone. Dear Professor Gopin, it's my pleasure, our pleasure to see you, to welcome you to our Center for Vienna Center for Reconciliation Studies at Friedrich Schiller University. It's very great that you can attend our second day of our seminar and with all our participators. And we have such great discussion from psychosynthesis and psychological approach to deal with conflict. I would like to introduce our speaker, Professor Dr. Mark Gopin from Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution, George Mason University in the United States, with the topic of the research of the self-examination, reconciliation with oneself, and peace building. Please, dear Professor, are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, great.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's really an honor to be here. It means a great deal with me, and I hope someday I will be able to come directly to the country and to the university. I want to begin with just the reasons why I've spent about 30 years as a practitioner in conflict resolution and peace building, and I've spent a good deal of that time as a professor of conflict resolution on the ground, and I wrote about 8 books about it. And I've always danced between 2 different worlds. One is the world of analyzing and practicing with or helping the practices of religious peace builders and pioneers of reconciliation in extremely bad circumstances, where there was reconciliation not like the typical models. The reconciliation was deep and profound, right in the middle of conflict between 2 enemies. And so from Sarajevo to Jerusalem to Damascus, we work with people who are working across enemy lines in a deep way of love and care when they find one person, a group of people, and then they build it into dozens and dozens, and they have reconciliation right in the middle of conflict. I found that to be, I've always been deeply intrigued by the possibility of that, why that's possible psychologically. And I have investigated the roots of this for thousands of years in different religious traditions and wisdom traditions, and of late investigated it in terms of neuroscience, because the psychological explanations are the most irrational ones and plausible at the present time in terms of us looking at this from an empirical scientific point of view, and therefore in terms of replicability. Is this something that's just a one-off with certain kinds of people, or is this something that can be trained and scaled up? And so as I wrote the books, I wrote a book on the inner lives of religious peace builders, bridges across an impossible divide. Think about that from a psychological point of view. And I discovered that what it takes, that reconciliation requires a whole of what I'm calling a whole of brain experience. And that whole of brain experience means a self-awareness that is pretty rare. Not only in wartime is it very rare, but it's also very rare in diplomacy and negotiations and in peace building, because basically there's all sorts of wonderful qualities to diplomats and others in terms of negotiations. But when it comes to the level of reconciliation that we're talking about, when it comes to care across class lines or enemy lines, that's a very rare quality. You know, in Isaiah 2,500 years ago, Isaiah 58 asks that the only way that you can really restore your society is if you break bread with the poor. And breaking bread was specifically in the Hebrew meant sharing it at the same table. And as if that's not enough, the verse goes on to say, if you bring them into your house. And so from a class conflict point of view, and the many wars that are rooted in class conflict, and the way in which totalitarianism and classism are very closely related in terms of an embedded approach to seeing the other as enemy and as threat in order to take from them, in order to steal, which is a good deal of the relationship between class warfare and identity-based warfare. When you bring somebody into your house, there is a completely different brain reaction to that process. What I discovered in my work with enemy systems is that sleeping in the house was the moment of personal and psychological transformation. Because when you go to sleep in the house of somebody who might kill you, you are completely vulnerable. I even remember a pair of peace builders in Africa one was an imam and one was a Christian pastor. And I remember them confessing to me, one of the people confessing to me, you know, we've been peace builders for a while. They'd gone through a process where they had killed each other. They had killed each other's tribes. One of them lost an arm. And then they were going around speaking for peace. And I remember distinctly one of them, the pastor, saying to me, you know, when we were in Switzerland, I still thought that when we were sleeping in the same room together, maybe I should kill him tonight. In other words, there's always that possibility of complete vulnerability when you go to sleep. And so when you wake up and you haven't been killed, there is a sense of union that is the stuff of reconciliation. What interests me about that illustration, and there's many, many others, is that the brain is always thinking of itself. The basis of advanced thinking, and from the time of Aristotle to the great scientists now, who are studying animal intelligence, crows and others, is that thought thinking itself is revolutionary. Well, it turns out from a neuroscience point of view that thought thinking itself also is the way in which we exhibit self-control, compassion, and the ability to live by the rule of law, the ability to live by sharing, the ability to not steal, to not kill, to not take everything, to not kill in order to take everything. And so the amygdala is the space of, in the brainstem, is the space of fear and terror and paranoia. Paranoia is why conspiracy theories are so important to violence and to group violence. And then comes along these fascinating different lobes of the cortex, where compassion in the MRIs can now be seen in all parts of the cortex in very interesting ways. And then higher thinking, of course, is associated with a variety of sections of that. What's interesting about when the brain is most lit up by the MRI is surprise, shock, humor, things that integrate the higher brain thinking with the lower brain. Those are the ones that seem to transform our behavior, even our identity, and perhaps even our personalities. And I actually have seen people go through, I myself went through these experiences of being in the house of the enemy and having a life transformation, meeting the children of the enemy, the people I had spent my life being afraid of, playing with those children, and then having a life transformation. So what I'm fascinated by in the area of reconciliation is self-examination, because self-examination has been a thousands of years institution of all the great religious traditions, especially from Buddhism, but really in Taoism and Hinduism, and certainly the great Abrahamic traditions, beginning with the biblical stimulus to that. And so if you look at that thousands of years practice of people who would become eventually more pacifist, whether they be prophets or clerics or mystics or monks, they all engage in this process of self-examination. Think about it in a very simplistic way. When somebody kicks you in the shin, let's say it's even an accident, and they kicked you and you're hurting, the first thing you say is a swear word. But your body did not decide, your higher brain did not decide to swear. Your brainstem decided to swear, and it told your mouth what to do. because you didn't have a chance to be in self-control and be self-examined. And alcohol makes everything 1,000 times worse. There's no self-examination. It's all inhibition, and the brainstem is controlling everything, including your mouth, including your fists. The moment that you have a second to say, huh, I think that hurt. The moment you say, I think that hurt, or I'm not happy, your higher brain is already in charge. It's already telling your feelings what they are by the use of the linguistic system. And that is the beginning of nonviolence. The ability to say, this is what I am feeling, is the beginning of the whole of brain being in relationship to the other that's standing before the self. And so this intrigues me from a practical point of view of conflict resolution and peace building. And it suggests that many of our methods have been wrong, that our methods should have begun in the internal space of practice in self-awareness, and that when we meet with the other, we should be engaged in practices that are going to make it more likely that our whole of brain is engaged, not just our rational self, not just our bodies, but some combination that makes all of us deeply aware of the other, such as being in the home of the other. And obviously it can go wrong because you can be vulnerable in the home of the other and they say, you know, we hate you people. And then you go and say, oh, I'm getting out of here. So it's not a magical formula. It takes a great deal of adjunct work with the other aspects of peace building and conflict resolution. Safety and security are critical. To all of my practice for 30 years, I worked for 17 years as a rabbi in Syria, in a place that had been an inveterate enemy of many of my people across the border. And because of the way that I practiced it, I was fortunate enough to evoke a tremendous amount of trust. And then I fell in love with them too. And to this day, my center, we work with thousands of women refugees and helping them to become political activists and social change makers wherever they are, in Gaziantep and in Jordan and inside Syria. We're still working inside Syria in places where people are under constant threat. And the women are pioneering conflict resolution methods that we've shared with them. So how did that happen? Well, it all happened by very complicated processes of higher brain and lower brain trust building and integration, and a lot of self-awareness by me and self-awareness by others. So I think that's the basic experience I've had that I've written about in Healing the Heart of Conflict. There's a section on self-examination. I've written about this in Bridges and in all of my other books, and I'm fascinated, and I'm just beginning now to write on compassion and reasoning. My next Oxford book is about integrating the brain through reasoning and the higher functions of compassion. So this is where I'd like to see things go in the future of reconciliation and peace building. So thank you, and would love to have a chat with you.
Dear Professor Gopin, thank you first of all for the expression and for the powerful explanation of things. I think it's touched both and emotional on the intellectual way. So the energies and the direction of peace. I find also the connection to the Bible. Maybe I was just imagining a little bit to the Bible concept of understanding and of some kind of stressful things that can reconnect, and the awareness from the thing from the first hand, and the connection. It's things that emotionally comes to the person, and it's very, for my opinion, it's very describes our as human being, as not logically every time, but we are not only logically, but we are a more animal or human behavior. So thank you for this expression, and it was very great pleasure to hear you here. Also, Francesco Ferrari, coordinator of the program, so also here. Please, colleagues, if you have a question to Professor Gopin, please raise your hands. Yes, Alessa, I see you. Yes, please.
Mr. Chavin, thank you very much for your presentation. I have a comment about how you said that you have to sleep in the house of your enemy. When the conflict in Ukraine erupted, it was not yet the war, but it was after Maidan, and the whole population was very polarized. What I started to do is to bring students, leader organizations, students from Kiev to Kharkiv, from Mariupol to Kiev, just to see their colleagues, their fellow students, and communicate. And there was so much propaganda on both sides that they were actually literally afraid to come. Like, people from Kiev were asking me whether it was okay to wear vyshyvanka, our national embroidered shirt, in Kharkiv. And for me, this is ridiculous even to ask, but they were really concerned because they were very electrified by the news and everything. And they were asking me what would be the outcome of our meeting. And I would be saying that the best outcome would be if your new friends will take you touring around the city. And they said, well, that would never happen. And they forgot that they said it after we had this meeting and everything, and their friends actually took them touring the city. So this actually approaching your, so to say, enemy or opponent and seeing that he is not a monster but a human does a great deal in the reconciliation process. So thank you for pointing that out. I felt it intuitively, but this is very good that it has been conceptualized, and very glad to hear that. And the other question I had, could you expand on your research on compassion? Because this is of a great interest for me, and I think for those who are the participant of this conference.
Okay, so to answer the first question first, so it's a wonderful anecdote and story, and I think that we should build a lot more stories of what can also be called an embodied experience of the other. And so that embodied experience, once when we had students gather in a Palestinian-Israeli village, we had everybody sleep in a different house. And it was very clear to me that the conversations then became far less important, the group conversations, than the experience of them each being in the house of the other. And there's a good reason for that. When we gather, when intellectuals gather people in a room, or diplomats, they think that we're being our most rational. That's completely false. When you're in a room with the other, and there's two groups especially, there's a binary that's created, and the regression from a mental point of view is extraordinary. You're constantly weighing every word as to whether I am with my group or against my group. Is he saying something against us, or is he with us? And everybody's being evaluated. It's very regressive behavior. But when you're walking along a street and checking out the restaurants, when you're hanging out with music, you're not deciding at every moment, is he with us or is he against us? Your body and your mind are absorbing something in a completely different way. And it's not because we're not rational. This is not an argument for non-rationality. This is an argument that we jump too quickly to rational debate on complicated issues without the preparedness of our whole of brain and whole of body, because it's very difficult to compromise on anything. It's very difficult to rationally investigate. It takes a great deal in order for that to happen properly. So that's why this embodied approach, I think, is the best path. And compassion is like that, because compassion is a bridge between non-rational and rational parts of the brain. Olga Klemecki, the great neuroscience researcher in Europe, I think she's Swiss, her name is Klemecki, has written the most on empathic distress versus compassion. Mm-hmm. And my work is being based on the distinction that the scientists have proven between empathy, which actually regresses you. When you feel the pain of your family, when you feel the pain of your nation, you actually regress. You become angrier, you become withdrawn. when you're too overwhelmed with everybody's pain. But if you feel love and joy and enjoyment in helping others, it actually raises your mind to more rational thinking. Because when you're in a compassionate state, you're actually trying to figure out, okay, I have a lot of people in front of me, my family, everybody in the emergency room in the hospital, they all need me. How am I supposed to help all of them? And so what you do is your compassion is combining with your rational, scientifically trained medical mind. What can I do right now in order to help all the patients? How can I be the most efficient? How can I care for them? I should say a kind thought to them, and then I should move on. All of that is a combination, a brilliant combination of compassion and the higher mind of reasoning. That's the kind of compassion we're looking for. We're not looking for a doctor to break
Very
down,
interesting.
in crying. That's okay, it's understandable, but what we're looking for is the higher kind of compassion.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are another questions for Professor? Okay, great. So, dear Professor, it's very great pleasure to hear you and that you have time to join our conference. And if there are no, we are recording this conference. If there are no problem, we will publish part of this conference from our association, International Association for Reconciliation Studies. That of course, maybe of course you hear about it. Maybe you hear that we are building now an international association, big one. And so we also can publish this this recording. I think a lot of people will be joining this these lections. And
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to meet you. And I also want to wish the people of Ukraine great blessings for health and safety and reconciliation and a new approach that can bring the people together past the boundaries of war. I wish them the deepest blessings.
thank you very much. And I think people here are very pleasure with this word. So, okay, thank you. Dear friends, so we now officially finished with the presentations of our wonderful conference of 2 days, and we have very 2 full days of experience, maybe new experience, maybe knowledge, and maybe things which we are going to little bit deep. And I think the most important perception that I was also trying to touch it in my presentation, it was the personality of peace builder personality, because we need as a peace builders, maybe we first have to build peace in ourselves. We have to find peace in ourselves as the people who promote peace. And I believe this. It was Yom Kippur yesterday, the holiday for Jewish people, and there was day of that people forgive each other, and they forgive because they looking for forgiveness from the Lord. It's from the third power. It's kind of understanding that we sometimes don't know what we are doing, and sometimes we regret after we're doing something, and we understand that we can do it in the future. And this understanding brings us that we seeking for peace, we're seeking for quiet in ourselves, because in peace we will create peace and we will find peace. Thank you very much. And now we go to discussion. I think we have a short discussion for our project. We hear the projects we are now working. First of all, we're working on development projects as a part of the International Association of Reconciliation Studies. It's teaching projects and scientific journal publications. and now we are now it's our project developing with the Peryaslav-Khmelnytsky University, and I think it's very wonderful. It was very wonderful group from Dr. Yegor Kucherenko. He gave us very great presentation. Think about psychosynthesis and reconciliation. It was deep going, and it was very structural and very great feedbacks. Please, Yegor, if you want to say something.
Okay, thank you for all participations of this conference. I think that it's a very good start of our collaboration. Как будет?
Yes, exactly.
Окей. Нашої
Because
співпраці, нашої
it's
подальшої
English,
співпраці.
and also when you go begin to speak English, I understand that I have problem with English. So I think
Okay.
in the next time
You have promised me that
that
in Kyiv you will speak Ukrainian in our
can.
conference, which we devoted to psychosynthesis.
The next year,
In
yes.
April, yes.
This April, close.
This April, yes.
So close.
Okay. I wish you all a strong health, a good work, and to be creative in this work, because as you can see today, we have different tools to solve this problem in political areas, but I think that it's not our task. In psychological, in educational areas, and I think that our program, which we want to produce in Ukraine to help the combatants, to families of combatants, it would be like маленькая попытка, little попытка, да?
Attempt.
Yes. To make peace in our soul at first, in our families, in our communities. And thank you very much for your reports, for your attitudes. And I hope that this conference, it only the first and the second conference, we can make it maybe next year. What do you think about it, Benjamin?
I think first of all, we're not finishing here, because I'm preparing things that we are probably we go to prepare on the International Association for Reconciliation Studies, and develop. I will send probably via. I think we are digital now. We don't have other options, so we will stay connected, and we will say the draft that we will to some person I saw. There's very interesting projects explained, and also Leonid Nikolaev. I think we can begin with those things, with these things. We can begin with develop. Also, we have already great publication of our book of international to resolution of conflicts. I think that's also a great platform to maybe to build some more cooperation. But now I think we can first of all we make a group connection of the.
Okay.
I thought I hear about this yesterday from persons. We will make group connection, and I think this is the panel. This is first panel. I think it's a small one, but it's very important one. We may develop it on the something bigger, something stronger, because we have a strong potential here. And because in this time I wanted to do it something small, but the core of people that interested, that are working in this. So we will stay connected. I will send to participants probably from Ukraine, people who are working there. they have to be connected with us. They have to be connected together. They have to be connected to the international society. And I think it's more, I saw in the, yesterday in the presentation of Vladislav, that he says, we see ourselves as part of democratic society, of part of open society, of exchange ideas. And I think it's important to be there. And we here at Jena Center, we want to see you as part of us, because we are together. We are dealing with the same problems. We're talking the same language. We are thinking about same things, and it's great. And then, so we will. It's only begin of the process. We will stay connected via email and via association. I think from association we can build a panel of reconciliation in Ukraine. It's reconciliation in Ukraine for Ukrainian people. It's not for Russia and Ukraine. It's for the people of Ukraine. It's for the people who live in. It's for people, both Russians, Ukrainians, Jewish community, Tatar community. It's for all communities. So I think it's a great beginning. Thank you all for your time and and your schedule, that you have those time to visit, to speak, to participate. It's a great pleasure for me and for our center. And thank you.
Thank you for your support. Welcome to Ukraine.
Okay. Okay.